1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake in this debate. We on Open in Government understand and believe that trans women are women, but specifically what this debate is about and what we want to be able to regret is essentially how the feminist movement over the past few months has largely become more insular in its nature and has largely disassociated itself from portions of the feminist movement, particularly with these radical feminists who tend to be more conservative, who are the TERFs. What exactly is this thing that we have a problem with? The way that a lot of these TERFs and radicalized conservative women who do have some animosity and to a large extent perhaps aggression and some sort of beef with women who are trans, whether these be pre or post-op, whether they're closeted or not. And the way that the movement has disassociated is largely by disenfranchising these particular women and saying that you women, you conservatives and radicals, are not part of the feminist movement. This is largely problematic because we also understand that the feminist movement is and has a huge degree of intersectionality, ladies and gentlemen. Meaning, it exists on a spectrum. You have a left, a right, a moderate, and in many instances where things are all happy and fine, we all wish things to be kumbaya and all of us to be friends, but we do understand that multiple strands, because of this intersectionality and because these people are expressing their own ideologies and beliefs, which to a large extent in recency, or let's say over the past decade, has strongly shifted, let's say left, becoming more progressive, hence even more intersectionality between the feminist movement and the trans movement. We need to be able to understand how the reaction to these things isn't to push these particular people to the margin, something that, yes, maybe these radical feminists are doing, but these two wrongs don't necessarily make a right, and we need to be able to prevent both of these individuals from engaging in more hostility and becoming even more radicalized. Sure, I'll take your point of information.
Are TERFs primarily anti-trans first or feminist first?
We think that it largely depends, right? Because we also can't assume all of these particular TERFs are also monolithic, right? We can't assume that all of them are as hyper-aggressive as certain paid media and troll farms are portraying them to be, because we need to also understand where these particular people are coming from. In many instances, because of things like the birth lottery, culture and religious norms that influence their hyper and ultra conservative behavior do portray these people to act in a way of self-defense, to react in this way. I'm not saying that that reaction is necessarily good, especially when it tries to box out these other trans women who, like I characterized in my pre-oration, are part of the movement. We need to necessarily include these particular people and not necessarily disenfranchise them and disassociate them. So what does not regretting look like, and what do we want on our counterfactual and comparative? What we want is the following. Number one, being able to understand that the feminist movement, the way that it evolves dynamically and the way that it becomes even more accessible as the world becomes more globalized, is not a monolith. You have multiple strands, you have huge amounts of intersectionality. Trans women and radical women both are a part of the movement, and we don't necessarily want to be able to pick a side. What is the harm in that? The harm in picking a side and disassociating these particular women from that particular group because they're radical, because they're conservative, because we launch these narratives of trying to be able to necessarily blame them and push them to the margin, shifts the Overton window and radicalizes the feminist movement as a collective group even more when you genuflect and cater to these far left-leaning progressive ideologies. these particular women who are centrist, or these particular women who are wanting to box out these particular women who are TERFs, for instance, do have a right? Because they're also acting in this way of self-defense, trying to be able to protect trans women. But this is exactly where it becomes quite complicated, and instead of being exclusionary, we want to be inclusionary so that discourse and discussion can particularly permeate. And this can only happen when both these particular women are able to have a rallying force and community behind them from the feminist movement. Sure, there are going to be bigots on both sides of this debate. There are always going to be women whose minds cannot be changed, but at least those centrists from both camps can engage in some sort of discussion in order to be able to coexist. I'm not debating some kumbaya bullshit that they're all going to be friends, there won't be any friction, but in terms of being able to lubricate that particular process, we need to be able to validate this particular ideology as something that does exist in terms of awareness, of which later on we can de-radicalize that when we can engage and touch them within the particular movement. People like thought leaders, politicians, celebrities, and entrepreneurs who are trying to be able to maybe forward more positive messaging in order to be able to change their minds. Because these particular TERFs don't exist also in a radicalized spectrum. It also exists in some people who are maybe confused. They might be a victim of misinformation and gaslighting from other people whose Kool-Aid they've drank for far too long, who we want to be able to target, and we can only be able to help those particular people who can be helped, who are willing to listen, who are willing to be educated, and who are willing to be able to understand so they can make a particularly informed decision. And here's the worst case kicker. In instances where they themselves want to disassociate, we allow them to do so, as opposed to prematurely making that decision for them when we exclude them, when we give this pejorative label, and when we label them as not part of the feminist movement, even if these particular women are radical. For all of these reasons, we are very proud to open this debate from side proposition.